By the time the widow reached the feed store that morning, the whole street had already judged her. Her black dress had faded to gray, and the hem she had stitched was coming loose again. Men on the porch paused just long enough to stare. Women by the dry goods window lowered their eyes with that careful pity that hurts more than mockery. And 5 hungry children waited at home in a wind-cracked shack beyond the last well in Red Hollow. They saw a poor widow counting coins in her palm. But Wade Mercer, standing across the street, saw something different. He saw a woman carrying 5 lives and refusing to drop even one. Because sometimes the strongest person in town is the one everyone mistakes for beaten. May Carter had buried her husband 8 months earlier after a spring stampede crushed him beneath a panicked horse. Since then, she had worked as mother, father, field hand, and comfort. Ruth was 14. Caleb was 11, the twins, Ben and Josie, still asked when their father was coming home. And little Eli woke at night, searching for a voice he would someday forget. That was what frightened May most. Not hunger, not debt, but memory thinning like smoke. She had come for flour, lamp oil, and maybe one small mercy the world never seemed ready to sell. But the West counts what a person owns before it counts what a person endures. Inside the feed store, Mr. Pritchard weighed her flour short, and did it with the same smooth smile he used on drifters and fools. When May asked him to weigh it again, the room changed in that mean little way towns do when a poor woman dares ask for fairness. Someone laughed. Someone muttered that grief had made her sharp. Pritchard spread his hands and said proper measure followed proper money. May did not cry, did not plead, did not break. She only removed 1 pound from her own order so she could still afford lamp oil, because darkness could be endured, but children could not eat promises. Wade crossed the floor then and laid no coin on the counter. He only looked at Pritchard and said that sack had been short before she touched it. Weigh it right and count your dishonesty while you are at it. The room went still. May turned on Wade at once and said she had not asked for charity. Wade nodded and answered that he knew. Then he told Pritchard to return what was hers, not what belonged to him. That was the moment May looked at him differently. Pritchard cursed, filled the sack, and threw in a little sugar just to end the shame outside. Wade asked one question. "Are you making it?" May nearly lied, but the lie died in her throat. She said, "I am making it until I am not." Then she started the 3-mile walk home because her mule had gone lame and there was no money left to replace it. A town will laugh at a hungry woman until one hard man refuses to laugh with it. Later that day, Wade rode past the Carter place on the excuse of checking fence line. The house leaned like it was tired too. The roof had been patched with flattened tins, and smoke rose thin from the stove, meaning the woodpile was nearly gone. He saw Ruth hauling water with both arms shaking. Caleb trying to fix a gate latch with twisted wire. One twin rocking Eli while the other scraped burnt cornmeal from a pot. And in the middle of all of it, May moved like the axle of a broken wagon, still somehow turning every wheel. When Eli stumbled off the porch, she caught him with one hand and kept stirring with the other. When Caleb split his thumb, she wrapped it in cloth torn from her own apron. When Ruth swayed from lifting more than she should, May took the bucket and smiled so the girl would not see despair. Wade had known struggle. But this was not hard living. This was a siege. 2 mornings later, the banker came. Horace Bell, gloves on paper and vest, 2 hired men behind him. He stood in May's yard and announced that Ezra Carter's note had matured. The grace period was over, the interest had climbed, and unless payment came within 2 weeks, the house and remaining acreage would revert by lawful claim. May listened with Eli on one hip, then asked only one thing: how much? Bell named a figure no widow with 5 children could raise. Ruth went pale. Caleb gripped a stick. Wade watched from the gate until Bell finished. Then said every man in the county remembered how Ezra had sold Bell prime cattle cheap during the fever year. If old accounts were worth honoring, perhaps all of them should be spoken aloud. Bell rode off tight-jawed, promising that paper still outweighed sympathy. The law can evict a family, but it cannot force decent men to look away. That evening, Wade came back with an offer built carefully enough to preserve dignity. He told May he needed someone to keep books for his autumn cattle drive, and watched the chuck wagon stores until the herd reached depot. He said he would pay fair wages in advance. May studied him for so long, the cicadas sounded louder in the silence. Then she asked, "Is this work?" "Or Mercy wearing work's hat," Wade answered. "It is work." Mercy does not ask a woman already half exhausted to spend nights over ledgers. That pulled the faintest laugh from her, and for the first time since Ezra died. She let help enter without believing it had come to own her. Over the next days, May worked like a storm that had finally found direction. She rode beside the cook wagon with account papers pinned beneath a coffee tin. Counted beans, salt pork, coffee, oats, corrected the trail boss twice, and proved she could stretch supplies the same way she stretched life at home. Men started asking her where things stood, and Wade discovered what Red Hollow had missed. Her strength was not loud, but exact. It lived in numbers, timing, restraint, and that fierce refusal to waste what little remained. The money she earned should have been enough to hold disaster back. But the West never sends trouble alone. On the final leg of the drive, an early rain hit the flats. The creek near Red Hollow rose fast and black, and a rider came hard with word that the lower road had washed out and water was heading straight for the Carter place. Sometimes strength does not arrive with spurs and a rifle. Sometimes it arrives with tired eyes and exact numbers. Wade and 3 hands raced through the storm. By the time they reached May's place, brown water was ripping across the yard. Ruth stood on the porch clutching Eli. The twins were crying inside, and Caleb was chest-deep near the chicken pen trying to free a trapped calf that did not even belong to them. May was already in the torrent with a rope around her waist, one end tied to the porch post. Reaching for the boy while the current slammed at her legs, Wade hit the ground before his horse stopped, tied his rope to hers, and plunged in. But even then, it was May who got her hand on Caleb first. May who shoved the calf loose with her knee. May who nearly went under and still came up dragging life with both hands. When Wade hauled them clear, Horace Bell's hired men were standing on the road above, watching the bank crumble as though they were measuring future property lines. The flood ruined the kitchen floor, took the chicken coop, drowned the winter kindling, and left the house smelling of mud and loss. But by sunrise, something unexpected happened. Red Hollow came. First one wagon, then another. A widow from church with blankets, the blacksmith with nails, 2 ranch hands with cedar posts, old Mrs. Pritchard with soup and shame on her face. People had seen May in a flood, and now they could not pretend she was merely unfortunate. They had seen what she really was. The hands holding a family together while the river tried to tear it apart. And that was the night Red Hollow learned what kind of woman it had been calling poor. Bell arrived before noon with his folded paper, hoping to finish what weather had started. But he found a yard full of neighbors rebuilding what he meant to seize. Before he could speak, May walked through the mud to meet him. Hair loose from the storm, boots still wet, 5 children standing behind her like witnesses. She told him he could take her land by law if he wished, but he would do it in front of every eye in town. And every one of them would remember the man who stripped shelter from children a day after their mother pulled them from floodwater with her own hands. Bell looked around and found no soft faces. Only hard ones, Wade then said, quiet as a knife. That he was prepared to by Carter's note that instant and place every line before the county judge. Bell spat in the mud and named a smaller figure, and to everyone's surprise, May opened her satchel and laid down every saved coin, her wages, and her hidden scraps of hope. Then said Wade could cover only the remainder as a loan against next spring's produce and labor. Not charity, never charity. Bell took the money because greed bends faster than pride. And when he rode off, the whole yard breathed again. By winter, the Carter place was steadier. The roof no longer sagged. A new mule stood in the lean-to. Ruth laughed more. Caleb carried himself straighter. The twins stopped asking whether supper would be small. And Eli slept through the night. May kept books for Wade's ranch and 3 smaller outfits besides. Her words started carrying weight, and the town that once pitied her now listened when she spoke. A woman forced to bend all year will choose her own moment to stand one evening. With snow, thinking about the horizon, and the children chasing each other through yellow grass, Wade stood by May's fence and asked whether she had room in her life for partnership someday. Not rescue, not dependence. Partnership. May looked at him. Then said she had no room for a man who wanted to save her. Wade answered that was fortunate, because he had come to stand beside her, not in front of her. And the smile she gave then was the first full one Red Hollow had seen on her since Ezra died. In the end, that was the story the town kept. Not that May Carter was poor, not that she was widowed, but that when life tried to tear 6 souls apart, she held 5 lives together so fiercely that the 6th, her own, finally found someone worthy enough to help carry it. The whole town had seen a poor widow. Only one rancher had seen the woman beneath the worn dress. And once the others learned to see her too, Red Hollow changed. Because sometimes the miracle is not that help arrives. Sometimes the miracle is that dignity survives long enough to be recognized. Even a hard Western town can learn the difference between pity and respect. May Carter had never asked the world to feel sorry for her. She had only asked it to tell the truth, that courage does not always ride in with thunder. Sometimes it walks 3 miles for flour, patches a roof in the dark, faces down a banker with a baby on one hip, and steps into floodwater because love weighs more than fear.